Hey, it's Rod Yates. Welcome to another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode, I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned. And my special guest today is the Living End frontman, Chris Cheney. On June 17, Chris releases his debut solo album, The Storm Before the Calm. The record shows a different side to Chris because it features instruments like pedal steel, acoustic guitars and piano, which may not sound terribly exotic, but overall the record is worlds away from the bombast of The Living End. The album took years to make, during which Chris's life veered dangerously out of control, as he talks about in this interview. He also talks about discovering music and learning to play guitar as a kid, breaking big with The Living End, and loads more. But we started by talking about Chris's debut solo album, The Storm Before the Calm. I seem to remember, I'm sure it was around about 2016, interviewing you for a Living End record, and there was talk then about a solo record. Has it been gestating that long?
Yeah, it has. It's the same journey, yeah. I think, I started demoing as far back as maybe even 2014 or something, just kind of throwing ideas around that I had that I didn't think fit the band. And I went into Red Door Studios in Collingwood, which I was sort of a part owner of at that point, and just put some ideas down there, not knowing really what I wanted to do with it. And I ended up with probably 10 or 20 songs from those sessions, and it wasn't until 2016 that I actually stepped into a studio in Nashville to record it for real. I think the stuff before that was maybe demos, maybe kind of just ideas. I just didn't really know. So, yeah, when we were talking then, that was probably as I kind of pulled the trigger and thought, right, I'm actually going to make a proper solo record. I've got my songs ready. I had 10 songs, went into a studio in Nashville, recorded the album, and then I scrapped that as well. Well, I scrapped half of it. I just kept kind of dabbling and kept writing songs, really, and then I kept getting sidetracked as well. So, yeah, it's been a hell of a journey, but it's finally gotten there.
Why was half that record scrapped? What were you searching for that you weren't getting?
Why was it scrapped? Well, it's a long story, but I lived in LA for 9 years pretty much, and I spent a lot of time going back and forth. And so I finished that record, and then once I kind of did it, I was like, all right, well, what do I do with it now? Because I didn't have a deal. I didn't really have any set plans as far as who was going to release it, what record company, just how I was going to roll the whole sort of concept out. And I, even from the beginning, I never wanted it to be just like a little side project. I wanted to give it everything I could when the time came. So I just kind of sat on it for a while, I suppose, and I was probably back here touring with The Living End, and, life just kind of got in the way, I suppose. And in the meantime, when that record was finished, I think I just kept writing more songs, and then it was quite a dark record at that point. I think I ended up with this kind of snapshot of where Chris Cheney was at in his life, and it wasn't a particularly happy place. Let's just say that. I was dealing with a lot of sort of personal demons and some bad choices that sent me into a bit of a tailspin, to be honest. And a lot of the record was kind of about that. So it was was pretty hard because I was kind of ruminating on these poor decisions that I'd made, yet they were fueling the song. So I was really kind of happy with the songs that I was writing, but they were really difficult to listen to.
Yeah.
That's tough when you're making a record. You want people to be able to listen to it and enjoy it. And I just found that half the record was really dark. And so I think I just kind of shelved the whole thing, and I had to try and get my life back in shape before I could even approach the record.
And when did that happen?
Oh, what time is it? That probably happened in the beginning of 2020, I suppose, when I kind of got back on track. It was just as the pandemic really happened, because I was on tour here in January, and I was supposed to be here until like May or something on tour. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. The tour got shut down. I went back to Los Angeles, and about probably 6 weeks later, we packed up there for the second time and moved back to Australia and went into lockdown here. And I started writing more songs, and I wrote some of the more upbeat songs. But yeah, it was probably around about 2020 when I just kind of decided, all right, well, I'm going to just keep half of what I'd done in Nashville, because I had all these other ideas floating around, which ended up sort of balancing up the record. And all of a sudden I could listen to the album, and it wasn't just a kind of a morbid, depressing listen.
Right. There is still very much a darkness to the record, and certainly in moments it feels like a very biographical album, and lots of reflections on, I don't know if the dreams of youth is too lofty, but certainly the idealism of youth, and then perhaps the fact that some of those dreams are dashed as an adult. Is that a correct interpretation of some of the themes of the album, and is that where you were at when you were writing initially?
Yeah, I suppose so. I guess, as I said earlier, I got myself into a couple of situations that weren't sort of ideal. I ended up in hospital at one point, just pushing the boat out a little too far, a little too often, shall we say.
Really?
Yeah. And so that kind of, made me, I don't know, probably, it definitely was a wake-up call. And I think you just sort of get to a certain point, where you start kind of looking back, I suppose, on the childhood thing. There is a lot of that on the record, but I'm just trying to sort of think why it went to that place. Probably just me kind of second guessing a lot of the decisions and stuff that I'd made, and probably thinking back to perhaps loftier times, and maybe missing Australia a bit, and missing the innocence and the kind of carefree nature of being a kid, and here I was kind of in my mid-40s at this point, all of a sudden feeling like my life was kind of spinning out of control, and then subsequently getting sick and ending up in hospital. So I suppose you look back on those perhaps more optimistic kind of days and times, and a lot of this record just kind of spilled out. It's only now that I'm sort of analysing it.
Had you, that idea of when you say pushing the boat out, is that something you'd done throughout your career, or was that a...
No, it hadn't. And that's the thing, I waited till I was in my mid-30s to start acting like a rock star. I was too busy before that. We were always touring. I was always playing shows and always kind of fairly professional, I guess. And, I don't know. I think some of it came as a result of the death of my father, which was like 10 years ago. And it kind of, I just sort of rebounded, I think. That put a lot of things into perspective and made life very, the finality of it, I suppose, was just it's very difficult to comprehend and understand when you lose a parent. And the circumstances with which that happened were very traumatic for me. So I think I just was like, all right, all bets are off, We're only here for a short amount of time, and I'm just going to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it, and irresponsibly.
Right.
And most people do that when they're in their 20s, I guess, especially guys in rock bands. So I kind of let my hair down a little bit too much, and it's not all bad. I was also functioning, Sure. I was always writing songs, always playing shows, and I suppose it just got to a sort of a breaking point for me where, and it just happened to all sort of coincide with being in Nashville. It was initially in 2016 where it all sort of came to a head. Yeah. And, I kind of had, it wasn't a meltdown, but I definitely felt like I was sort of losing my grip a little bit. And I was like, I can't believe that I'm actually in Nashville making this record that I've spent a few years already working on. And this is where the saddest country records and, all that sort of stuff is like, it just couldn't have been more perfect or imperfect.
Right.
But I'm okay now. That's the whole thing. There's a feeling of redemption around this record because I feel like it had to kind of happen, and it did fuel a lot of great songs. And I'm really happy that there's this whole other side to the album. Then I kept writing more in LA. I wrote 3 or 4 songs there, and then I wrote 3 or 4 songs back here after we'd moved back up during the pandemic. And they were the ones, that was Corner Shop and California. I was kind of reminiscing about being over there. But football team's the other one that talks about the childhood and sort of looking back. So, I suppose it was a combination of a lot of things. It was the death of my dad. We moved overseas just after he died. That was very strange to be in another country and sort of feel like perhaps I should have been here a little bit longer for my family, but we just kind of took off. And all of a sudden I'm over in LA going, what the hell am I doing here? I don't have a career here. I don't have a profile. The Living End is known over there, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kind of let myself go a little bit.
And that move to LA, again, getting there and not knowing what you were doing or you didn't have a profile over there, were you escaping something? Was it just time for a change? What was the reason for that move?
The reason for that move was in 2010, my family and I lived in New York for 3 months while I was writing The Ending Is Just the Beginning repeating record. And that was just like a sea change thing of like, let's go somewhere and get really inspired, like Berlin or New York, the typical places that people go where the place is just buzzing. So we went to New York for 3 months and I wrote that record, the crux of that record anyway, and came back and just loved it and thought, well, wouldn't it be great to live overseas for longer than 3 months, just for an extended period? And initially for me, I thought, well, we'll go to LA for 2 years because we had some friends there. It's a really good industry place. The weather's better than New York. 2 years sort of turned into 9.
Right.
But as I said, half of that I was probably back here.
Sure.
So, but as I said, it was definitely just the timing was a bit off. Just coming off the back of my dad passing and stuff. So there was there's a lot of questions and a lot of things that informed this record and the weird part about it is that as dark as what the record was and the way I was feeling and stuff, I kept coming up with these songs that I'd show people and I'd listen back to and it'd be like, wow, this is really good. It's not just, oh my God, you make me want to slip my wrists. It wasn't that kind of thing. It was that the songs were good because they were so raw and so honest and so unapologetic. And there was no skirting around any issues. I was telling it like it is. And I would kind of cringe sometimes when I'd listen to the songs because I'd be like, do I really want to say that? Like, do I want to actually say it? And it was like, well, I guess I could kind of, I didn't name any names in there, but it comes close to on occasion. And it's like, well, I suppose I could kind of sugarcoat it all and, and gloss over it. But I think the best songs and the best art is the stuff that it does shock you and inspires you in a way.
And I think the thing is as well, you're not only being so open, you're also being so open without the Living End name behind you and without the bombast of the Living End, because there are some very tender songs on this record. So you're exposed on several different fronts. Was that also weighing into that idea of, do I really want to say this?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of I didn't want it to sound like an adult contemporary record, but I definitely wanted to show a grown-up side to me, and I was okay with doing that. I was okay with stripping back the guitars and taking the drums away and just having piano and acoustic guitar and just singing. For the first time, I was kind of okay with my voice, and I never really have been in our career. It's been very much a work in progress.
Right.
Yeah, that's the sort of the maturity side that I was okay with was pushing the vocal right up the front and and being okay with sort of bearing my soul, I suppose, and knowing, and as I said, knowing that it was that it was good. I think I had a good grasp on. I just hit a different sort of level as a songwriter, and I think that's a combination of living in LA, being in Nashville, being around different people, different standards over there, and being okay with stripping things off because you can see it clearer. Once you take all the production and stuff away, you can see something it's a lot simpler and it's easier to make the decision of what the song needs. So it's been such a great process for me because I always knew I could sort of do that, and it's a matter of proving to other people. And that's been the really cool thing out of this whole project is I've had a lot of comments that go, I didn't know that he could do that.
Right.
I thought he just did that other thing. I thought he was the guitar guy. I didn't know that he could kind of, compose songs like this and have strings and pedal steel and the piano again. That was a big part of this record was having Springsteen-esque kind of piano.
Absolutely. And you hear that sort of Springsteen influence from the get-go in The Impossible Dream, which is such a great way to start the record.
Yeah. Well, that was I always sort of thought that would be a good one to start with because it immediately comes out of the gates and, sets up the tone of the album, I suppose. I think if I'd just gone and made like a guitar rock record, I could do that, but there's nothing that interesting about doing that. And I think that's what people are probably expecting. So, I really hoped that I could have that track as the first one to come out of the gates with something completely new and different.
You mentioned, I guess, your father's passing, and I think one of the really touching songs on the album has Still Got Friday on My Mind, which I believe was inspired by that passing of your father, and has the lyric in it, there's some of your clothes still sitting there in a drawer, but I don't know why I'm still keeping them for. Was it inspired by your father's passing? And if so, what was writing that song like?
Hard work. It's like, not hard work, but that's one of the ones I suppose, was very, very honest and very, very confronting. And, some people will, when you're writing a song, you think, okay, well, that's kind of what I want to say. Like the clothes are in the drawer, but they don't. They kind of hint at it. I mean, I'm just saying it straight out. There's no kind of there's no mystery there. It's very very literal, I suppose. That kind of song. I loved I just kind of came up with that phrase, like "Still Got Friday in My Mind," because I love the idea that it was like a harking back to the easy beats, obviously. But I suppose it's just about regret and about loss and again, stupid decisions. For me, I was supposed to kind of go and visit him on the Sunday morning, but I'd been out, or maybe it was probably a Saturday morning, I suppose. But I'd been out on Friday night, and I knew that he was really sick. He'd been kind of deteriorating quite rapidly. So instead of kind of having an early night on Friday, I went out and kind of partied on, I suppose. Perhaps I was trying to block it out and to push it away, and perhaps I didn't want to go Saturday morning. I couldn't stand to see him like that anymore, being that ill. So there was probably a selfishness to me doing that. But of course, then I got there and he'd already gone, and it was like, he knew I was coming and he was waiting. But I screwed up basically. So that was it was a hard song to write. But when it's something that personal, you don't mess around. You want it to be good. And I really put a lot of effort into that song. And I'm really happy with the way it came out. And it's cool that it's got that other link, to Friday on My Mind, because that's like, well, that's the kind of, that's the good old days. We all think of that song.
Right.
And it's like optimism. It's, it's Stevie Wright. It's like Screaming Girls. It's the rock and roll band. It's the youth. And it's all that. And so I liked the fact that it kind of, again, it's me looking back in a way.
Yeah. And I mean, your dad, if I'm right in thinking, has been the subject of some of your songs with the living end. If you think about In the Morning and Nothing Lasts Forever, I think. What was your relationship like with him? You're obviously close.
We were. I mean, I don't know if Nothing Lasts was. Maybe that was kind of a bit about maybe my parents or something. I mean, it all comes from the background, doesn't it? I mean, none of us are making this stuff up. It's all in there. It's all personal experience in some form or another. Yeah. It's just the names of the innocent are changed, not necessarily the guilty. But the ending is just the beginning. That was when he just started, or he was sort of getting to the end of the road then. So it kind of goes back to there a little bit, and I was making that record in Byron Bay when he was really unwell. But no, we had a good relationship. I mean, he was such a great supporter of the band, and all of our parents were. I probably wasn't, as close to him as what I saw some of my other friends were with their dads. Maybe that's where some of it comes into play as well. It's quite often, it probably hurts more when you lose someone that you weren't that close with, because you can never go back and repair anything. So there's a certain bigger sort of regret there, I would say. So perhaps that, that is part of it maybe. I don't know. I mean, we had a strong relationship, and he was, I think early on, he was kind of very doubtful about this music career. But then, once he sort of saw what we could do, then we had all the support in the world from our folks.
Right.
But that's the same as any band,
Of course.
Put the guitar down and do your maths.
Well, talking about doing your maths and growing up, as some of the things that you sing about in this record, I just wanted to talk to you about growing up in Wheelers Hill in Victoria. What is Wheelers Hill like? What was it like?
It was great. It was a great place to grow up, because it was just like I talk about in the football team song and Corner Shop. I mean, they're real kind of like photo album snapshots of what that area was like. There was, it was very hilly kind of area. There was VFL Park at basically the end of my street. So every Saturday and Sunday there'd be a line of cars all the way down the street with, windows down, people waving flags and scarves. Nice. And people tooting the horns, like every Saturday and Sunday, like up until I was probably 18 or 19 maybe when they pulled that stadium down and it became like a housing estate.
Just for people not in Australia, VFL, of course, being Aussie Rules football.
That's right. Yeah. And there was a stadium, I suppose it is called VFL Park. And it's probably like, I don't know, 70,000 people or something every weekend. It was huge.
Wow.
Easily. Those were sort of the golden days of, well, I would say the golden days of football, but that's maybe just how I remember it, because I was such a fanatic. So if I wasn't kicking the football, I was riding my BMX bike around the neighbourhood. There was a milk bar around the corner that all the kids used to sort of congregate at. My primary school was just around the corner. The high school was just up the road. It was a real typical sort of, little nice suburb.
Yeah.
It was just sort of standard kind of middle class, area to grow up in. It was very multicultural. There were, I think, Wheelers Hill High School, where Scott and I both went, I think that had the highest percentage of Greek students outside of Greece or something live in that area of Wheelers Hill. It's like, it was just, it was great.
Yeah.
And musically, it was, that's where I first started getting guitar lessons, and I was lucky enough to have a really good teacher that lived in the neighbourhood, and he taught me all that sort of Chet Atkins country picking sort of stuff. And I had a very happy childhood. I did. I didn't sort of have any, no complaints. There's a few little things here and there that I remember as a kid, with my parents, not being together at one point, and little things that kind of, when you get a little older, you sort of think back on and they weigh on you a little bit. But for the most part, it's just, normal kid.
Idyllic.
Just went pear-shaped after that.
But what drew you to the guitar? Well, you say you got those lessons, and I think you were about 6 or 7 when you got an acoustic guitar. But why?
Yeah.
What drew you there?
No, my mum just signed me up for it. As far as I can remember, it just began in primary school, and it was lessons that they had at lunchtime. I don't know why they were at lunchtime at that point, because later on they were after school. But initially it was like there was a teacher and there was 5 of us sitting around, in the sort of gymnasium or whatever it was at lunchtime. I don't know whether I expressed any interest in it or not, but I know that as far back as I can remember, I've even got photos of me with a little toy guitar, and then there's other photos of me with a microphone when I'm like 3 or 4 years old standing on the couch. So, they always played music. So I must have been inherently drawn to it, even as far back as then. So I'll have to ask my mum again, like why I did those initial guitar lessons. But I remember not really liking it because it was just too hard. I don't think anyone enjoys playing the guitar when you first learn, because you think it's never going to work. That hand and this brain, they're just not connecting because, they've got to do different things.
That's right.
But I obviously persevered. But I remember the teacher saying to my mum, if it was like every subject at school, if he would apply himself, he can do it. but he's away with the birds, He's a daydreamer. And I didn't practice or anything, so I just kind of went, I don't know about this. But I don't know. I guess a few of us sort of stuck with it. And one day the penny dropped and, I started to discover records and, got into Bon Jovi and then, seeing those guys up there and Richie Sambora doing it. And there was another kid that lived around the corner from me who was probably my first kind of guitar hero. And he was the older brother of a guy that was in my year, and his name was Matthew Stocks, and his brother was called David Stocks. And he used to live around the corner in Wheelers Hill, and he had an electric guitar and he'd plug in to his amp.
Wow.
And he'd open up his window and he'd like sort of serenade the neighborhood, and I could hear him playing. And I'd always be like, oh, man, that sounds so cool, because he'd play Bad to the Bone. He'd play Smoke on the Water over and over and over again. And I just thought, and then, I'd go to school and I'd see him then. He was a really cool-looking guy and he played guitar and, I think the girls kind of liked him. So he was a big influence. I've never really spoken about him, but now that I think about it. So anyway, you persevere.
Yeah.
And then one day, this hand, and the brain actually all come together and you play something that sounds a little bit like music. And I guess, for me, as soon as that happened, I was hooked.
We'll be back with more from Chris after this short break. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Chris Cheney. I think you mentioned Chet Atkins there before, and I know people like Chet Atkins, Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent were and are big influences on you. That doesn't seem like the typical music that someone starting out on guitar would try and emulate. It would be more like Smoke on the Water or AC/DC. What was it? Was that the music you were hearing in your parents' household? Was that what your teacher was telling you, was showing you?
No, Mum and Dad always played. That was Little River Band, Air Supply, Rod Stewart, all that sort of stuff. That's what I remember them playing. They had the 50s records, but they were buried deep in the record collection. They never pulled them out at parties. It wasn't until later on when I sort of started getting into that stuff that I sort of started flicking through Mum and Dad's records, and I'm like, oh my God, you've got like the first Elvis record,
Wow.
You've got the first Everly Brothers record. They had all that stuff. And they were like, oh yeah, and they had bought it when they were teenagers in the 50s.
Okay.
But I suppose I was like anyone else. I was right into Bon Jovi, a lot of that sort of hair metal kind of stuff. I'm trying to think who else.
Did you see any of those bands as they came through town?
Yeah. I went and saw the Slippery When Wet tour. That was the first concert I ever went to.
Wow.
That was, I loved that record. There was a few of us that were into that album, and it was a big deal. And then it was at the Glass House in Melbourne, and just seeing them, we were right at the back. I think I had binoculars. That's how far back we were. Because I didn't have screens back then, I don't think, at gigs. I think you had to have the binoculars. And that was a real moment because it was just incredible. They were probably the biggest band in the world at that point.
Yeah.
And it was the whole thing. It was just electric. It was a proper massive rock and roll concert. John came out on the trapeze or the wires in Living on a Prayer. It was just like the video clip.
So good.
It made a huge impression. And I'm not quite sure, what turned me from that to the 50s stuff, but I do remember one other gig that my parents took me to on the Gold Coast in Australia. There was a band called the Deltones, who were this old 50s doo-wop
I remember
group
them.
who sang behind Johnny O'Keefe, and who, for those Americans listening, was our first kind of proper rock star, I guess, the wild one. And Mum and Dad had seen them play in the 50s, and they were playing at like an RSL or something, and I remember that gig. I really loved it because they did those songs that they had done with him, but they did all these other 50s songs. And it just struck a chord with me, absolutely. And then seeing things like Grease, and that 50s thing was just kind of, it was intriguing to me. And then I think it was after that I really got into people like Buddy Holly. Elvis was always there. Everyone knew who Elvis was,
Sure.
And I guess then I started to discover the guitar playing behind that kind of music, and there's a whole image and everything that goes with it, that I found much cooler than a Stratocaster and leather pants and long hair. It was like a, big sort of jazz guitar, cool hair.
Yep.
those were Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, all the people you mentioned before. And then the Stray Cats, obviously,
of course,
who combined everything. It was like, okay, that's the band. There it is. That's what I want to do.
And then you find a kindred spirit in Scott Owen, who has been your living end bandmate not ever since, but up to this day. What do you remember of meeting Scott? Was it an immediate connection?
Yeah, I remember. So we were still in primary school, and I can remember, this one afternoon, Mum and Dad saying, we're going to a barbecue today. My older sister Samantha was good friends with his sister Melanie, and it was like, okay, your sister's friends are having a barbecue, and we're all going, and it's just down the road because we lived on the same street, and we're going to go over there. So we went to this house, and there was a group of the older sisters were all friends, and then there was the parents, and then there was all these younger brothers sort of running around, and Scott was one of them. And I remember he had like buck teeth, Coke bottle glasses, this super blonde like bowl cut, and then there was 2 or 3 other younger brothers there that day, and I've still got photos from that very same barbecue, and where we just kind of, I think we kicked the footy. I think there might have been a pool there. We jumped in the pool, and I didn't really click with the other 2 guys, but I did with Scott for whatever reason, and then we started kind of palling around a little bit, riding skateboards. He was at a different primary school to me. So then I think it was the following year that we both started high school, and our parents became good friends after that. So we would go over to their house quite often, and I was playing guitar and he was playing piano. And I just remember, him kind of sitting there going, play that Buddy Holly song, or play that Johnny B. Good one, and I'd play it, and him and his older brother would go, oh, check it out, cool. And then Scott was just starting to learn piano, he knew a couple of little things. But he was the same as me. He was absolutely drawn to music. He loved Midnight Oil. He wasn't really into the 50s thing at that point. His older brother was right into Cold Chisel, Midnight Oil, Australian Crawl, full Aussie rock sort of stuff. So Scott was well into that. And I think I sort of started showing him a few Bill Haley records and Buddy Holly, and then the Stray Cat stuff. And I said, we should play music together, but not piano. You should get a double bass. And it was really that simple. He actually just went out and bought a double bass.
Wow.
Because we were both working at his dad's supermarket at that point. So I think we had a little bit of savings, and I think he had half the money and his parents maybe gave him the other half. And he rang me one day and just said, I bought one. I bought a double bass. And so I probably just jumped on my bike at that point, and I said, I'll be right there. And I run around. I remember getting there and walking up the stairs at his place, and there he is. He's standing there and he's playing it. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, that's a proper double bass, and you're actually playing it. Like, he just taught himself immediately. And I guess, that was it. We were off then.
Wow.
And then we didn't really ride our skateboards too much after that, or kick the footy. It was just, let's jam.
And you became the Runaway Boys.
We became the Runaway Boys because that's how obsessed we were with the Stray Cats. So we weren't watching Stray Cats videos and getting the train to the city to buy Stray Cats records. We were learning their songs, and we learnt that whole first record of theirs, called ourselves the Runaway Boys, learnt another probably 10 or 15 50s songs, and started to try and look for a drummer in high school, and had a couple of different guys there, and just started jamming in the music room at lunchtime. And that was when the kids used to press their faces up against the window, because there was all this mesh stuff. It was a tiny little room that we could go in. There was this black mesh over it. It was almost like where they used to keep the musical instruments, sort of locked away. They'd put all this black mesh over the window so you couldn't really see in. But we were in there making all this noise. Yeah. And, of course, kids would all come and press their faces up against the windows. And it was like, it felt pretty good. That was the first ever audience, anyone watching. And, once you get that sort of feeling, and then after lunch you walk around and people go, hey, that sounded really cool. Then you're hooked. That's it. There was no choice.
You've got your identity. There it is.
Absolutely. Superhero. It's like putting a cape on.
But you did shows, right? You played the Wheelers Hill Hotel when you were underage. Like you'd get out there and do these covers.
Yeah, that's right. We started to enter things like Battle of the Bands. There was a Wheelers Hill High School Battle of the Bands. There was a Caulfield Grammar, which was another school in the neighbourhood. Highvale Primary School had one, which was good because I'd actually gone there as a kid. We entered a whole bunch of them as the Runaway Boys, and we probably only had, this was before we were out gigging, and so we probably only had 3 or 4 songs at this point when we used to enter those Battle of the Bands things. But we had all the tricks and stuff back then. Scott would get up on the bass every time. I'd be on my knees playing the guitar. We had all the moves and none of the skill. But we won a couple of those things, those Battle of the Bands, which was nice because we were always up against these other bands who were playing they were playing Australian Crawl or they were playing Bon Jovi or Metallica or something. So we stuck out like a sore thumb.
Right.
Just the way we looked and playing that kind of what was kind of oldies music, I suppose. And then, in 91, we played our first shows in the city at a place called the Richmond Club Hotel, and we were underage still at that point, and the Wheelers Hill Hotel, which was the pub on the corner of the road where we lived. And, we could get in, we could play our set, and then we'd have to leave again. We'd have to be escorted out.
Steep learning curve?
Yeah. Well, it was some of the kids from school could get in if they had fake IDs. So that was kind of cool that, we would see some of our classmates and stuff that were, that had managed to get in and a lot of the older kids from the area and people, it was like a bistro kind of thing and people would be, finishing their dinner and we'd be playing in the corner. And I was just, those first gigs are just so magical because you just can't believe that you're actually doing it.
Yeah. And
it might as well have been Wembley or something because you're that enthusiastic about it, and it's just everything at that point, and then you're going to school on Monday, and there's a couple of the kids there. Oh, good gig, and then it's like, yeah, man, we're doing it. We're actually a gigging band now.
Yeah.
Even though there's probably only 10 people watching, and the rest were all probably still finishing their dinner.
Doesn't matter.
But you need those moments, and we did 1,000 of those before we ever got anywhere.
Right. Well, at what point does that morph to the living end? Is that around 95?
Yeah. So, we started doing these gigs at places like the Richmond Club and then the Corner Hotel, little residency things where we'd play on a Wednesday night. And then we started, and we'd always have like a mailing list thing that we'd have at the front door. And if, because people weren't coming to see us at that point, we'd basically just get up and play to whoever was there, whichever old drunks were still kind of hanging around. But occasionally, people would put their name down, and so we'd do these mail-out lists. Okay, the Runaway Boys are playing here and there and everywhere else. And we started to get a few bookings to play at things like weddings and 21st because we were kind of like a party band.
Right.
It was a very upbeat kind of visual thing, and we were playing some of those. We were extending our repertoire to a lot of Gold 104 sort of stuff. Like 50s easy listening, like Everly Brothers, and all the classic sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So we started to get a lot of bookings of that, and what we would do is we'd put that money into an account because we always had this idea of being an original band. And it was around about 95 that I think we kind of 94, 95, where we started to think about writing our own songs. And that was a big step because we had started to get a bit of a following at a few places just playing the covers. We could play like the Royal Derby in Brunswick Street on like a Sunday afternoon, and there'd be like 200 people or something there.
Right.
And I remember it was a big transition. We'd go, we're going to play a song that we wrote now, and it was a typical people go, oh, God, here we go. Why? Why are you doing that for? And we'd play it and people would be like, yeah, maybe. Not sure. I'm not convinced yet. But we were pretty determined back then because a lot of the bands from that scene, they never went original. There were some big bands in that kind of rockabilly scene, and they'd been around since the 80s. And they were kind of legends, and they were much bigger and more established than us, but they didn't write their own tunes. Whereas we always had the idea that we would do that one day. We would become an original band. So we kept writing more and more songs, and then I think we just got to a point in '95. We thought, well, I think we need to change the name. If we're going to be an original band, we can't sound like a cover band. So I saw The Living End written at the end of this film in the credits, and I thought that's a really good name for a band. So I remember sitting at a car park in the car with Scott one day, and we were like, what do you reckon? Should we do it? Should we change the name? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And I remember being really tentative, like, oh, I don't know, Runaway Boys has kind of got a thing about it, and people know it. Are we really going to? And he's like, let's just do it. And so that was it. It wasn't long after that we, we went and probably made the Hellbound EP, which was all original songs. And then, of course, we sent that off to Green Day, who were coming to Australia, and it was January or February of '96 that we did our first kind of national tour in support of Green Day with this new name and this EP, and that was kind of the death of the Runaway Boys.
That's a huge, that's a bit of a trial by fire to be going from playing covers and 200 people on a Sunday afternoon to be supporting Green Day in big rooms at that point. That must have been a steep learning curve. Were there certain things that you picked up on that tour? Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it seems like and then that was it. Then they were a big success, and the rest is history. And it wasn't the case. We did that tour, and then we went back to playing to probably less than 200 people because we were now the Living End. Yeah. We weren't the Runaway Boys. So anyone that was into the Runaway Boys, a few people stopped coming to see us because they weren't interested in. We were kind of a bit more punk rock, a bit more rock and roll. We'd lost a bit of the Billy side of us,
right?
And we were starting to become what the Living End is now, which is a mashup of all those things. But initially it was like, we were like a psychobilly band. We wore the exact psychobilly clothes. We had the hair. We had every song was like 100 miles an hour sort of slap bass kind of thing. So it was kind of weird. We've had these different eras. We went from the real traditional 50s thing, playing covers, to becoming this kind of psychobilly group, to then becoming like really pop influenced, I suppose. Yeah. Not being afraid to slow things down and to bring in different influences. And so the Green Day tour, it was a huge steep learning curve because we had gone from playing the Tote to a couple of hundred people to playing, 2 nights at Festival Hall, and it was just incredible because I had never been to that many sort of stadium gigs at that point. Yeah. Never stood on a stage like that. It was really frightening, and just we were completely unknown. We went down okay, I suppose, but the shows were sold out. I mean, Green Day were massive, so no one was there for us at all. Sure. No one cared. They were only there for Green Day. And I remember them being really nice to us, treating us pretty well. I remember the promoters not being so nice. There was a very old school mentality of, right, put your gear over there, get on and play and get off, and then, get back out into the audience. You're not allowed to hang around backstage here. And they were really a lot of them were just so nasty, and I just remember thinking, I'm going to learn from that. I'm never going to be one of those people. If we ever get anywhere, never look down on support bands or just treat people with respect, and this industry's rife with it, of course, people thinking they're more important than they are. But yeah, it was great. It was a great sort of introduction and apprenticeship, I suppose, that tour. And then, of course, we went back to playing to not many people again, but we did have that advantage of saying we were the band that was on that tour. So Triple J, they started to play Hellbound a little bit on the radio stations, and we could make a phone call or try and get a gig or something, and we could say, well, we're the band who did the Green Day tour. And it's like, oh, okay. There was a little bit more of an awareness. So They definitely gave us a huge leg up. Yeah.
Those learnings that you got on that tour, because I think, moving forward a couple of years, obviously Prisoner of Society comes out, huge smash, and obviously your profile, everyone knows who you are now in Australia, and you start heading overseas as well, and you do things like the Warped Tour, and I think you may even have supported The Offspring overseas. So this band that started as the Runaway Boys is now a global entity. But at some point along the line, you have to figure out how that works and how you operate as a professional band. It's not a hobby anymore. Did you have people on the Warped Tour, on the Offspring Tour, or anywhere else that kind of showed you the ropes about this is how you're going to make it through this many shows in this many days?
Oh, no, nothing like that. No, I mean, I think we thought that there was a lot of really great live bands in that scene. And when we did the Australian Warped Tour in 97, I think it was. So we put out Hellbound, and then we did another EP called It's For Your Own Good.
Mm.
And then we were still playing like lots of sort of university gigs and lots of support shows like Body Jar and Jebediah, and we weren't big enough to sort of headline at that point. We were playing a lot of lunchtime university gigs and things like that back then. Then we did the Prisoner EP, and then we got on the Warped Tour, and we were originally supposed to be only doing the Melbourne or Sydney show, and whoever it was running the tour saw us and added us to the whole tour. And I remember on that tour, the diversity was amazing because it was Blink, it was Pennywise, Royal Crown Review, to Totenhosen, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. I can't remember who else.
With Deftones on that as well?
Yeah, they might have been. I can't remember, but it was really diverse and they were all really good. And that's what I remember about that is going, well, if we're going to get anywhere in this industry, we have to be a cracking live band. That's what's going to get us noticed. But that's the thing, I suppose, because we've been playing since like 91 and we'd always had the visual thing. It was only a matter of time before, hopefully, the playing and the songs caught up with that. Mm. And then we would have both things going for us. We would not only look the way that we looked, but hopefully we sounded great and we had tunes and, the showmanship side of it probably came a bit later, the confidence. I remember there was a lot of concentrating back then, really concentrating to play, whereas now it just seems easier and we kind of, the shows go in a whole different direction to what they did back then. But anyway, so we had that EP, the Prisoner EP, and all those bands would come and watch us play. And you could feel it kind of bubbling. And they started to come and talk to us and ask questions. And then it was after that tour, they all went back to the US. And that's when the phone started ringing because they had shown our EP to all the record companies over there. It just kind of spread like wildfire. And all of a sudden we had Interscope and like Sony and Warner Brothers and everyone all ringing our manager saying, what's the deal? Who are they signed with? And she's like, they haven't signed with anyone. We've just had this independent kind of EP. Who wants it?
Wow. And
so it was a direct result. Pretty much, I think, Dickie from the Boss Tones, he really talked us up when he got back to the US. You got to see this band, there's this band in Australia. So, yeah, I suppose because of our, wanting to get noticed and being a good live band, that's what I took away from all of that. And I think that's the reason we're still here now is that it wasn't just a gimmick, it wasn't just about a song or timing. It was like, I suppose if you grow up in Australia and you see footage of the Oils or AC/DC, that's what blew our minds. And then you mix all that in with all the other influences of the Elvis and all that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
It's really, really important to be a good live band.
Yeah. How exciting was that period?
Yeah, it was. It was every dream that we had at that point, I guess, started to come true in probably bigger than what we ever imagined it would. If I think back to it now of, rehearsing in Scott's garage, and he used to plug into, he didn't even have an amp at one point. He used to plug into like the home stereo. And I think to go from that, and then we would go and see other bands play and we would think, we just want to do that. How do we get to where they are? Mm. And we did. We got to the Esplanade Hotel. We played the Gershwin Room. We started to tick these boxes that we thought we would never do. And then, off the back of that Warped Tour, it just accelerated. All of a sudden, those record companies that were ringing were flying in.
Wow.
We'd be playing a gig in Tasmania at the Saloon Bar, and we'd have the heads of these American record companies were there just to see what all the, see what the hype was about and see whether they wanted to sign the band. And, of course, they did.
Yeah.
But I remember it was very, very exciting, but it was just overwhelming. Everything started to kind of accelerate at such a pace that I don't even think I really knew half the time. It was just sign this, play here, this TV show, that TV show. I don't ever remember kind of turning around to Scott and going, we've done it.
Okay.
Like we've done everything that we thought was impossible.
Yeah.
I think we sort of, now we consider ourselves very lucky, but when we were 21, we were just kind of like, yeah, it was just the next logical step.
Sure.
And, you know, now it's like, not only did we get to that spot, but we've managed to maintain a kind of, you know, a career, which, I mean, it's tough.
I was going to say, that's no easy thing. At what point in your career did you get to the stage where you thought this is our career? So you understood what it took to keep the Living End together.
Yeah, probably, I would say probably around about 2005 when we released State of Emergency, because we'd had that initial huge peak with that first record coming out. And, you know, that was amazing because we went right around the world and we were in all the magazines and on MTV and doing interviews in Times Square and stuff like that and being on Letterman and all that just was crazy. And then, of course, Roll On happened and, you know, then I had a car accident, which was less than ideal because we kind of lost some of the momentum that we'd built in America. Mm. But we were so burnt out almost. That was at the end of Roll On. So this is probably like, you know, from sort of 2007 up until, you know, 2001, it was just nonstop. You know, I was forever
97.
Yeah, I guess towards the end of touring Roll On when I had the car accident, we sort of hadn't stopped, you know, and I'd always be losing my voice. That's the thing I remember. We'd be doing multiple nights, and I didn't know how to take care of my throat back then, and the sheer kind of exhaustion. I'd always have to, you know, we didn't cancel shows, maybe one or two, but I just remember always feeling like so fatigued. So when we stopped touring that, had the car accident, then we were going to reconvene to make the next record. That's when Andy left. And we got Travis left, and we got Andy on drums, on drums, and went back to America, made that record. It was okay, not my favourite record. Don't really want to talk about it.
That's Modern Artillery, is that?
Yep.
Yep.
That was okay. Then we went back to sort of steady touring, but then we did State of Emergency in 2005, and that's when that album just went through the roof, and we ended up playing 2 nights at Festival Hall, back where we had supported Green Day. So that was the moment I kind of went, okay, we've actually turned this around a little bit. We had that initial spike with the first record. Most bands who have something that big, it's very difficult to surpass that or even sort of top that again, and it'll do your head in most of the time, I suppose. But I thought, okay, I think we're having another kind of moment here, which not many bands get. So that was probably the moment I thought I probably don't have to go back to Scott's dad's supermarket and keep stacking the shelves, perhaps. Other people probably go, no, well, you know, there was no way you were going to go back to that, but I probably still think I might have to go back to that if I don't, you know.
But just following on from that, so you had that second spike, but then you had to figure out how to maintain that, which you've now done for the next 17 years. And there was that period in 2008 when you left the band that was kept very quiet and then came back. And it wasn't until years after that was revealed. But again, something's clicked where you can go and do this solo record now, for example, and you know that it doesn't put the Living End in jeopardy. You've just reached that point where the Living End is there. Is that correct? And
yeah, it is. It is, and I'm really thankful. And without sounding too kind of, again, mature and grown up, I think the three of us are just like, we kind of look at each other sometimes now and we go, how freaking lucky are we to still be doing this? You know, the tour that we're on at the moment, the Red Hot Summer, it's like 10,000 people every day, and the shows are just enormous. I feel like the shows are like teetering on the edge. They could go off the rails at any point. In the best possible way. There is nothing safe or bland about the way that we're playing now. Now we have this whole catalogue. But yeah, we're just a lot more thankful for it now. And I think the other guys are really supportive of this solo record. And yeah, I've never really been busier than I am at the moment doing painting, solo record. The band's going great. So there's still a lot of fuel left in the tank, and we feel very blessed, I suppose, because it could have ended a few times, and I don't know whether it's just stubbornness or pig-headedness or what it is that's kept us going, the drive. But I think we managed to sort of crack the code somehow.
Nice. Feels like a very apt title for the solo record, The Storm Before the Calm. It feels like you're at that calm.
Well, well, that's why it just it suited everything that I went through in Nashville, and to get this record finally done. I just sort of felt like if you can keep going, if you can just finish the record, and if I can just get the songs to where I know that I can get them, everything will be all right, And it felt like I was in this hurricane for a long time. But as I said, it's like it's a personal triumph for me, and there's a story of redemption behind the whole thing. And now it's like blue skies ahead. I can see the calm, and I can only be thankful because there was a few times I didn't think the record would come out, and I didn't even know if I was going to make it out. So, but that's life. I'm no different to anyone else. It's just that I managed to be able to put it into songs, and that's been therapeutic for me. And I'm lucky that I have that. I can pick up the guitar and I can put the story into a song. Some people can't do that.
Last thing, Chris, Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people you give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
Many people. I think you can have all the talent in the world, but unless you have a good team behind you, and it goes back to my mum putting me into those guitar lessons in primary school. I sometimes think, what would I do if I hadn't done that? I don't have any other qualifications, and I was never that great at school. This was absolutely meant to be for me. I'm the only one really in my family that's had a career in music. And I'm the only one that could, because I'm not qualified to do anything else. Our old manager, Ray Harvey, she was a great manager and was quite sort of tenacious in her own sort of way, and very instrumental in putting this band on the map. But I don't know, Scott, Andy, our audiences, the people that got into the band that have stuck with us, because we've got fans that they find us really unique as a band, and and we're very special to them, and they're very special to us. It's not just, I don't feel like we're just another run-of-the-mill rock band. There's something special about this. The list is endless.
Nice. Chris, thank you so much for all your time and for chatting. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Nice to see you again.
You too.
That was good. Thank you.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to Chris for his time, and thank you for listening. Just a reminder that Chris's debut solo album, The Storm Before the Calm, comes out on June 17. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's humansofmusic, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.